Hi, everyone, and thanks for checking out this movie review. So, today I'll be continuing with my current horror franchise, and that's the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. So, the film we'll be taking a look at today is the eighth installment in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, technically, the eighth film, Freddy vs. Jason from 2003. So, yeah, Freddy vs. Jason, obviously a crossover movie of the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. So, I'll just go ahead and get started with the premise and the setup of the movie, and then I'll get into my review and thoughts, which will contain spoilers. So, Freddy vs. Jason is a 2003 American slasher. It's directed by Ronnie Yu, who also directed Bride of Chucky. It's written by Damian Shannon and Mark Swift, and it's a crossover, as I said, between the two franchises. Uh, the eighth, the eighth installment, Nightmare on Elm Street. Um, the film retroactively establishes the two series in a shared universe and pits their respective antagonists, Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees, against each other after the former manipulates Jason into coming back to life and attacking the residents of Springwood to facilitate his own return. It's chronologically set after Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, which is the sixth film in this franchise. It kind of ignores Wes Craven's New Nightmare because that's not really part of canon in terms of you know, the franchise. That's sort of set in the real world, so it kind of goes back to the canon, I guess, and it follows Final Nightmare from '91. Freddy Krueger, now powerless in hell because the residents of Springwood have forgotten about him. He uses his remaining powers to resurrect Jason Voorhees. Freddy appears to Jason in the form of Jason's mother and manipulates him into killing the denizens of Springwood to create fear, allowing Freddy to regain his strength. So, in other words, Freddy's powerless right now, basically because nobody fears him because they don't really know him at this point. They don't remember him because they keep that keeps him at bay. So he uses Jason to kill people basically in town to start that thought process again that Freddy's back. Meanwhile, Lori Campbell, who lives with her widowed father, has a sleepover with her friends Key and Gib. They are joined by Trey, Gibb's boyfriend, and his friend Blake. Jason enters the house and murders Trey, and the police suspect Freddy. After a nightmare, Blake awakens to find his father killed by Jason, who then kills Blake himself. The police call it a murder-suicide the following day, hoping to continue to conceal Freddy's return from the rest of the town. Because again, they're trying to keep him at bay. They don't want the name brought up. They don't want anybody mentioning him to keep him at bay. So that's sort of the setup and the premise of the movie. Obviously, if you haven't seen the movie, it kind of goes from there. More people die. Freddy gains power. Yada yada yada. Go watch the movie if you haven't seen it. But you can probably guess from the premise that I've set up what happens. So the cast of this movie: Robert Englund, of course, is Freddy Krueger once again for the eighth time. Ken Kersinger plays Jason Voorhees. Monica Keena plays Laurie Campbell. Jason Ritter plays Will Rollins. Kelly Rowland plays Kia. Chris Marquette plays Linderman. Catherine Isabel from the Ginger Snap films plays Gibb Smith. And Brendan Fletcher plays Mark Davis. So that's sort of the cast of the movie. Like I said, directed by Ronnie Yu, 2003. Um, so before I get started with my review, I'm going to say that this review is going to be based on. It's going to come at you from a Freddy Nightmare on Elm Street standpoint. Once I take a look at the Friday the 13th franchise at some point down the road, I'll review this movie from a Jason Friday the 13th standpoint. But because I'm doing the Freddy series, obviously I'm gonna rate this and review it from a Freddy Nightmare on Elm Street standpoint. So okay, we'll just go ahead and get started with the pros. First of all, I have to give them credit here. I think that it's a pretty well written and well conceived film. It's not easy combining these two horror icons. I don't know why my light's not holding out there. It's kind of dark, but I think it's okay. I give them credit because it's not easy to get Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger into the same universe, and I thought the way they came up with it was pretty creative, using part of Freddy's backstory, the Nightmare on Elm Street mythology, where um, you know basically it kind of ties to the first film where Nancy turns his back on Freddy and he disappears because she doesn't fear him. So they sort of tie it into that, how now the whole town doesn't fear him because they don't talk about him and he's kind of forgotten. And so he uses Jason through a dream that Jason's having in the grave by using his mother to recruit him, in essence. I thought that was pretty clever, actually. And I don't really know how else they could have done it. So I give them credit for that, of combining these two horror characters with Freddy using Jason through a dream and sort of pulling the strings and being a puppet master, so to speak. Um, to muster fear again, muster fear of Freddy again in the town of Springwood. So I give him props for that. Very well conceived and written story. It's a well directed film by Ronnie Yu. He clearly had a vision, even though he admitted that he wasn't a fan of either of these franchises. I think that actually benefited this movie to use a director that wasn't like too heavy on one side or the other, kind of an outsider. And he's a good director. You know, he directed Bride of Frankenstein, Bride of Chucky. And even though I wasn't as big a fan of that movie as other people, it was well directed. I said that in my review. He had a vision. He made it work in this movie. I think Freddy's makeup is back to being like films 1 through 4 in the Nightmare on Elm Street film, which is good. It obviously got terrible, starting with part 5. Wes Craven's New Nightmare, it was fine there, but it was different. It was more like pulled skin in that movie. So I like Freddy's makeup. Robert Englund as Freddy. I think this is probably his third or fourth best performance as the character at worst. It might be third. I'm kind of it's right there with Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Not as good as 1 and 3. I still have him in those movies ahead as far as Robert Englund goes, but this is right there. I mean, this is full blown Robert Englund embracing the character as Freddy, um, embracing the character in fun and creepy ways. And so it's kind of like the third movie. That's the film's not as good as the third movie. Don't get me wrong, but Robert Englund's portrayal as Freddy, it kind of reminds me of the third movie to an extent because they combine humor and horror and they really balance it well. Where after part 3, it was too much of the humor side, and some would argue that before part 3, you didn't have enough humor in it, which I wouldn't argue that. I like the first 2 films as far as how Freddy is, but regardless, for most people, part 3 is the best of the movies. I think this is more in that vein where they don't ignore the humor. Freddy's got his one-liners in this movie, and I think his one-liners actually land better in this movie than they certainly did in the previous 3 or 4 Freddy movies. Again, going back to part 3, I think this one and part 3 are comparable in that regard, in terms of Freddy's one-liners and humor. So that was interesting. He's also got some creepy, scary moments in this film again, which we haven't seen. Well, we saw in Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and otherwise you have to go back to part 3. So Robert Englund is on point as Freddy Krueger once again. There's lots of Easter eggs and callbacks in this movie to both franchises, but more so the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, I would say, and that's what I'm going to talk about because that's the series that I'm reviewing. Talking about Weston Hills, talking about Hypnosil, how they keep these kids who had some knowledge of Freddy, how they keep them from dreaming by using Hypnosil against their will without them knowing about it. Weston Hills was obviously the psychiatric hospital for the kids in the Dream Warriors third movie of Nightmare on Elm Street. And there's a lot of other callbacks as well. I'm not going to go through all of them, but a lot of Easter eggs. They touch on both mythologies. The Nightmare on Elm Street at the beginning of the film, and then Friday the 13th about halfway through the film. So yeah, that was really cool to the fact that they were really loyal to both mythologies and franchises. They even mentioned, I think, I know a couple of the documentaries that they didn't want to screw up the mythology because that would have pissed fans off more than anything. The film looks good overall. There's good cinematography, I think, in this movie with some of the colors and the camera angles that they went with. It's a good looking movie. I like that they used the theme music from both, or the themes of both characters, I should say, throughout the movie, especially at the beginning when the film opens, and then again at the end when the film concludes with the Friday the 13th theme, as well as the sort of piano, the keys with the Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm not going to try to imitate that one. I did a bad enough with the Friday the 13th theme, but so I really enjoyed that they put those and combined them in there. Um, I really like the opening of the film, how they used Freddy's mythology and backstory, using clips from previous movies, and kind of get you up to speed in case you were someone that wasn't quite as invested in the Nightmare on Elm Street films. They did a really good job with Jason or with Freddy, sort of telling the story of how we got here. I actually thought that was really good, and it really got me into the film right away. The fight in the third act is pretty good and entertaining overall. They directed it in a way where you weren't sure who was going to come out on top as these two were fighting each other. Um, there's pretty good kills in the movie, although not terribly creative, but they're gory, they're graphic. But most of the kills are by Jason, but pretty good kills overall. So yeah, those are my positives for the movie Freddy versus Jason from 2003. Um, Now I'll get into some of my cons or negatives. Got to start with the biggest one right up front, and that's Kane Hodder not playing Jason. That gets a big red check mark, and not in a good way, a big red X, I should say, for me. Kane Hodder should have been Jason in this movie. Ken Kershner wasn't terrible. He wasn't the worst Jason, but he's certainly not at the top level Jason. Um, just his reactions as the character. I mean, he was big and bulky. That's why they used him because from a directorial debut, or directorial standpoint, I should say, they wanted a big, hulking, tall guy over Freddy, basically. I guess to make the fights better. I don't really buy that. I think the fans would have had more investment if it had been Kane Hodder. That's the point. And so that was a huge missed opportunity, in my opinion. I don't think Ken Kershner just doesn't play Jason as well as Kane Hodder did, or even Ted White or some of the other Jasons. It really should have been Kane Hodder. So that's a huge mark against for me. Some of the special effects they use CGI. They're a little over the top. I don't think they're going to hold up very well, especially as time goes on, particularly in the third act of this movie where they use more of the CGI, especially with the worm monster that the I forget the character's name because I really don't like him, but he's basically the pothead. That's all CGI. It doesn't look good. Don't like it. So I don't think this is definitely not one of the better Freddy special effects movie. Um, Another big problem that I have, and I know this is debatable when people review this movie, other people don't mind the characters. They actually think they're better than some of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. No, no, I'm not one of them. There's a couple characters that don't annoy me as much as others, but most of them we are badly acted, and there's not really any development to why we would care about any of these characters. Robert Englund's good. Monica Keena looks good, but I don't really buy her. I don't think she's a great actress, and the chemistry that her and Jason Ritter have is not good. I don't think he's good. Kelly Rowland, the best part was when she died. She was the most annoying, along with the pothead. Uh, the guy that played Linderman was okay, very cliched though. Catherine Isabel, it was good to see her, even though she wasn't in the movie that much, but her character was kind of forgettable. And Brendan Fletcher probably did the best with what he had to work with as Mark Davis, but again, he was only in half the movie. So yeah, the characters aren't well acted, not well developed. It's again, you could say that in at least half the Freddy movies, if not more. But that was a big red X for me. Freddy only kills one person in the movie, and again, I'm looking at this from a Nightmare on Elm Street standpoint. And it wasn't even a creative kill. He basically flicks his claws and sets Mark or Brendan, or yeah, Mark. Sorry, Mark, played by Brendan Fletcher, on fire, and that's the end of it. And then in real life, of course, Brendan Fletcher's room starts on fire. Which, if I'm not mistaken, we've seen that in another Nightmare on Elm Street movie. I think Part 4 with Kristen. So that's the only kill he really has, and it's not creative. And yeah, that's not good from a Nightmare on Elm Street standpoint. Um, Another thing is that so many typical teen horror movie cliches, from the nerd to the jocks to the pothead to just everything that you would imagine in a teen horror movie or a teen movie period. They got all those cliches in this movie, so if that's your thing, this will be a good movie for you. There's a lot of plot conveniences, knowledge conveniences to basically move the story along, move the film along without really explaining a lot. They just kind of pull it out of thin air. Um, the most notorious one being the fact that, Jason's scared of water, and we find out in this movie. It's interesting how we didn't know that in the first 10 movies. I guess because he drowned, they took that upon themselves to make him afraid of water. Interesting. I mean, that's a plot convenience. Let's be honest about it. Not a, it's a pretty lazy one. I wasn't a big fan of the whole side story with Laurie's mom and dad. How Laurie's mom dies, and apparently her dad's the one that kills her. Which I knew as soon as that was said that that's not really what happened, and it's predictable. And it's just kind of meh. Doesn't work for me. Um, and the other thing is we don't get Freddy versus Jason until the end, which is the title of your movie. And you have to wait through the first two acts of bad characters to finally get there. And then when we get there, as I said, it's pretty good, but it's kind of over the top. I didn't mind the ending, but yeah, I would have liked to see them fight more throughout the movie, I guess. So that's pretty much what I got for cons. It's a mixed movie, like a few other Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I'm going to once again rate it a 7 out of 10. I have a few movies now that I rate 7 out of 10 in this Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. It's not horrible by any stretch, but I also can't really say that it's much better than 7 out of 10. As you heard, there's things I like about it, there's things I don't like about it. It's fine, I guess, as a crossover movie goes. I mean, I wasn't going to try to compare it to the original Nightmare on Elm Street, but I do appreciate the fact that they used mythology from both series pretty well for the most part and the combining these characters in a movie that made some sense and wasn't just pulling them out of left field. I give them credit for that, as well as the directing and seeing Robert Englund back in the Freddy form that I want to see him in. So 7 out of 10. You'll have to see where I rank it in terms of the other 7 out of 10 Freddy movies that I gave when I do my ranking video here in a few days before the end of July here. But that's what I think of it, guys. Go ahead and give me your thoughts and comment down below on what you think of Freddy versus Jason. Um, like this video, subscribe to this channel to see future Nightmare on Elm Street reviews and ranking. My final ranking coming up shortly, as well as other movie reviews and other horror franchise reviews. So thank you for watching this video. Have a great day. Bye.